we can just get started, and when Alex joins us, we can have him share his information as well. But welcome everyone. This is called the State of the Industry series that Career Services is hosting. And it's just to give a little deeper insight into various industries and kind of the status of things that are going on currently in light of COVID-19 and just the day-to-day changing of the workforce dynamics. So we have some fantastic people here today, and I will let them introduce themselves. If you want to go ahead and start, Jackie, you're unmuted, so if you want to go ahead and start, that would be great.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so I'm Jackie Sandoval. I graduated with a degree in IMC in 2011, and I started my career as a media planning assistant at Cara. It's a global media agency. It's part of the larger Dentsu Aegis network, and I'm based in New York. So my first client was Procter & Gamble, and then I supported the Microsoft global marketing business for 6 years before transitioning to my current role, which is a talent development business partner. I now work to design the learning and development program, not only for Cara, but for all the media agencies that are under the Dentsu umbrella, the Dentsu US umbrella. And I think I really bring the unique perspective today of someone who has been on the ground delivering our clients' marketing objectives, but also someone who is now supporting, 2,000 media and marketing professionals to better deliver value to our clients, our partners. I'm also coming out of a summit this week where all these topics are being discussed. So it's very timely.
Great, thank you. Jennifer, why don't you tell us about yourself?
Hi everyone, my name is Jen O'Leary. I graduated in 2012 with a business administration degree. I had concentrations in international business and marketing, and I minored in French. I have a background in field marketing, event planning, project management. I initially started out my career in international marketing, so I worked for an organization in the media and entertainment space. And I worked with all of our partners in EMEA, Latin America, and Asia Pacific. I was in the media and entertainment space for about 5 years, and then I kind of got pulled into the HR space, where I've been for the last 5 years. So I've worked for software companies recently, where we're offering social recognition or learning and development software. Right now, I actually work for a learning and development company that offers online learning. And so I'm excited to be here, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. And finally, we have Amanda. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I had to laugh first and foremost. I almost forgot what I studied at Ithaca, but I am a 2010 graduate of the Ithaca College School of Business. My concentrations were marketing and management. I think a minor in speech communications. It's been a while since I thought about it. So I am here in New York City. My career has been in the past 10 years in B2B marketing. I started off in the software community. I worked with a lot of consulting organizations that they call value-added resellers. We worked specifically with Microsoft, and we we sold Microsoft, what's the best way to explain this, into organizations, and then our consulting team would basically explain how to set that up, how to make it work for your org. I quickly decided I wanted to pivot into the tech space. It was just growing and booming, and so I ended up at Shutterstock for a few years, where I worked on their enterprise marketing team, helping to sell large-scale stock plans to all sorts of groups of people who are working with creative. Recently, I've been working with ClassPass. They are a fitness app, which is a subscription service, and we were working on selling ClassPass into corporate employers and bringing on studio partners. And most recently, and one of the biggest reasons I'm here, is that I actually was completely impacted due to COVID, lost my job, but have found a new one. So I'm working with a new tech startup called Maven Clinic that helps support women and families, and we sell that app through the employer space as well, and it's just helping to fill like a critical gap in healthcare needs.
Great, thank you so much. So I guess one of the first questions that I can ask is, you know, how has the current pandemic affected your workplace or, you know, your job, both temporarily and or permanently? How do you see this changing? And anyone can feel free to jump in at any time.
Sure, I can start. So I run the field marketing and events team at a company called Absorb now. And so we've really had to shift our strategy completely during this time. In the beginning of the year, we had a whole set of 2020 plans. And in the middle of March, when this all hit, everything stopped, it got flipped on its head, and we had to rethink our entire strategy. So from an events perspective, we could no longer be at major trade shows or host any of our client summits. It just wasn't going to happen. So there was a lot of back and forth trying to get some of our money refunded or push it out to next year. And then we had to really rethink our event strategy, where we had to host some virtual events. And kind of what we're seeing now is that the space is kind of getting flooded with webinars and virtual events. So how do you set yourself apart, and what are some different and creative things that you can do to get ahead of your competition? On the other side of things, where I also run the field marketing sector, we work very closely with the sales team, and our objective is just to help them close business, whatever we can do, whether it's one-to-one personal marketing to an account, whether we're marketing to a group of accounts through direct mail or through email or through digital strategies. We've had to rethink all of that. So we had to kind of take a step back and think about how can we, because we're in the online learning space, which is a great time to capitalize on business with everyone being remote. However, how can we capitalize on that in a sensitive way based on the current climate? So we had to be really cautious about all of our messaging and how we pitch that to people. And then the last way we've had to shift is we'd have to kind of shift our strategy in the sense of how can we get people up and running faster, because people all of a sudden this hit and everybody needed to have online learning and they needed it now. So how can we get ourselves to sign these customers as fast as possible and get their system working as fast as possible? So lots of change. It's been interesting because we haven't really been able to do planning like we typically do in advance. It's kind of been on the fly, and we've had to keep going back and checking to make sure that the stuff we have in market makes sense and that our messaging is best for what's going on, because things are changing every day, as you guys know. So.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to answer that?
I can build on that. So you mentioned temporary changes, and I think a lot of these are all temporary, which is good rather than permanent. And maybe there's some good positive permanent outcomes of the pandemic, but change related to the workplace. I'll talk from the agency perspective. So because we have offices and clients across the US and across the world, we already had remote teams and were flexible and could, work from anywhere. But we are, now 100% remote in the sense that we're all at home until like 2021. So that's like the physical workplace change. And then, as I guess, Jennifer also mentioned, just changes related to the industry and the work that we do as an agency. So the agency's role is to connect the brand to the consumer through media, right? So I think there are three things you have to think about: the brands themselves, and then the consumers, and then the media. So the brands, I think when you think about the marketing industry, it's really to speak about all industries. So like our clients are across all categories, and some are impacted more than others. So we have a couple of people who have touched on Microsoft in the past, but we think about Microsoft and Pfizer, for example, they were impacted very differently and needing to shift focus, as Jennifer mentioned, focusing on maybe more of their remote collaboration for Microsoft, and then from Pfizer, more of the creating the vaccines. So more impacted than other clients like retail, for example, auto, or travel. So actually one of the things that I really liked and that I saw was, even though Airbnb was impacted by a travel decline, I loved how they created Zoom backgrounds so they can stay top of mind with their audience. I thought that was really interesting. And then you have, you know, your consumers who have, they're interacting with media very differently now, because our job is very much about mining for those consumer insights. You think about your day-to-day life, if you're not in your commute, or you're not listening to the radio in your car, you're not going to the movies or to the stores that you normally would, but you're spending more time on social media. Therefore, like the opportunity to like see an ad is very different. So I think the brands of the world are reacting very much to that. And then they're reacting to, you know, so yes, we're consuming, we're at home more, we're able to watch TV more, but then there's less content to watch to an extent. So advertisers who maybe plan to sponsor sports or, you know, primetime moments, that is, you know, something that they have to pivot for, as Jennifer mentioned, and replan. And because of that replanning from our clients, it really ultimately impacts how we as an agency make our money. And that's kind of why we're forecasting revenue decline and seeing probably negative profits, and have had to take some cost saving measures. But what I do think is important to remember is that it will be temporary. And, you know, the economy will improve slowly as regions reopen. I know that retailers typically see like revenue during the holiday time period. So that's still something that we haven't gone through yet. And then, you know, agencies specifically, there's still going to be new business opportunities, but those probably won't come through more until 2021. So again, all temporary changes, I think.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, obviously coming from 3 organizations that are 3-sided marketplaces, so we have subscriptions, members who use the product. We have providers of the service, so Shutterstock, that's contributors, which is photographers, videographers, ClassPass, that's studio owners, and at Maven Clinic, that is providers, doctors, and all of those folks. And then the third arm being that all of these have corporate offerings. So for us, it was really the temporary thing is pivoting to which audience to focus on. So specifically with ClassPass, given that everything we do is in person and that we urge our members to go to physical classes, studio workouts, that entire revenue, you know, it disappeared. So what we had to do was pivot to say, okay, what can we be focusing on for the next 6 months overall to save the industry? So one of the big things we did was move to our studio side and figure out, okay, what sorts of donations can we be making? What sort of revenue can we help drive their way as they're closing their doors throughout a pandemic? That was a really big focus for us at the time. And with Maven Clinic, though, it's really interesting because the app is offering telemedicine, which is hotter than ever. There was actually like a pivot to the B2B side to get Maven Clinic into more employers' hands to actually get more members signed up on Maven Clinic, which can help and support throughout the pandemic. So I think a lot of the times when you have these, you know, these Ubers and Airbnbs, ClassPasses, where you've got these double-sided marketplaces, and as I now call them, triple-sided with corporate offerings, you've really got to, I think the pandemic's just made us all have to pivot on which audience is the one to focus on, right, and to shift our efforts to, because, you know, a lot of the times right now members can't take part in these services like Airbnb and ClassPass, but what other audience can we help support? And so those have been a lot of the temporary shifts, and when things get back to normal, right, we can start to focus on all of our audiences again, and make sure that we're helping out all of those different sides of the triangle.
Great. Thank you. Wow. It sounds like there's been a certainly a lot of shifting happening, not just in location and you know, the physicality of the job, but in certainly how your day-to-day operations look. Have any of your specific job responsibilities been adjusted? I know some of you touched upon it a little bit, but anything come to mind that might affect your role long term?
Definitely. I think marketing teams, as all of the team, has shifted to this work from home. they're really looking at marketing teams to provide more internal communication. Internal communication is more important now than ever, and some organizations have dedicated internal comms sitting on their greater PR teams, but most companies don't. And so they're really looking to marketing as the overall communication team in general, the team that most likely knows the brand and the values, to help reshift those values and help with that communication internally while people are, not so centered in the workspace physically.
Yeah, there actually hasn't been too much change in shifting responsibilities for me, other than really having to change the strategy and messaging that we're doing. So, and moving a lot faster than we typically do. I fortunately have always worked from home, so I didn't really have to shift to remote work. However, other people in my company had to, but we have several different offices. So it kind of already felt like people were working remote for us. I know though that people who weren't in the bigger offices before have had some changes, and our HR team is working really hard to make sure that people still feel included and it still feels like, a nice working environment. But as far as, aside from the messaging, not too much has changed for us, other than just having to rethink everything. But on a day-to-day basis, I mean, I'm in a role right now where we're dealing with different projects every week. Things are shifting already. So it wasn't too much of a change for us. Like I did mention with online learning, we've actually seen a lot more customers who are coming to us and want to sign up for online learning because they need it more than ever now. And as Jackie mentioned, we have had some clients that, are going through a harder time right now where they've had to put us on hold. So we are trying to make up for it by shifting our focus on getting new clients in the door. And even like Amanda mentioned, who should we be focusing on? So we take a hard look at, who are the prospects that we can be going after that are still doing good during this time? What industries are still doing really well? And how can we message to them and get them on board as clients?
Yeah, I think my experience really mirrors that as well, that, our core responsibilities for talent development, those are largely unchanged. As you mentioned, the shift from in-person learning to virtual learning. So in a way, my role has been really similar to the education industry, where we've been taking, our media basics lessons. This is a series of lessons that our new hires usually join twice a week. So for example, that I was just looking for best practices for online learning, and we had it fully virtual for the first time. And then I was even looking for those best practices for doing a virtual graduation for them. So a lot of the times I'm looking to the education industry for how we can have the best virtual experience for our learners. And then on top of that, empowering everyone to work virtually. So identifying resources for managing teams, managing clients, and pitching new business. And then providing resources to those who are on furlough, because, we do have a population who unfortunately are on furlough, or I myself am on a reduced work week schedule now, so that they can continue to develop in their career and be ready for when they're ready to rejoin the organization.
Do you see these changes continuing, like working remotely or, some of these shifts? And what sort of advice would you offer our students or anyone in the marketing industry to thrive working in a virtual environment?
I think some of them are going to stick. I think this was a good opportunity for companies to see that, remote work can be productive and just as good as being in an office, because there's always been that debate for a while now. Are people as productive in the office versus at home? What's better? What's worse? I think the great thing about it is that now that companies are more open to this, it really expands where you can apply and where you can work, because they might be really open to you working in a different state than their headquarters is located, now that they know how to handle remote working. So I think that I think a lot of companies are trying to get back to normal and bring people back to offices. But I think that they're way more open now about people working from home a couple of days a week, or like I said, you could get hired and your company could be based somewhere else. So I think some are temporary, some are permanent. Some of the advice I would offer, so I did work in an office for the first like 7 years of my career, and there are some amazing things about working in an office. There are some things you're gonna love, some you're gonna hate. And it's actually the same thing with working at home. I've been doing this for almost 3 years now. Some things I love, some things I hate. So pros and cons to both. I would say that a lot of companies right now are now even more doing these Zoom meetings, and everybody's getting on camera. So, you know, I'm assuming some companies still aren't, but if you can have conversations with your manager or any of your peers, do it on video chat. That really is really helpful for me. It helps me continue to connect. Almost every company I know offers like some sort of chat service, whether it's on Slack or whatever it may be. Utilize that. Like I'll reach out once in a while to my colleagues and kind of chat on there. And we also try to like start our meetings out and like, don't forget to ask people like, how was your weekend? And just kind of getting to know people. The last thing I would say that we've done that's been really helpful is we've scheduled like some virtual happy hours and played like some of those online games, which has been a fun way to connect with your colleagues when you're not able to do it face to face. So.
I guess my biggest piece of advice, because I don't need to reiterate that this is definitely probably permanent and not permanent for so many. My biggest piece of advice is just scheduling your time in your day if you're going to take a remote role. I think it's really easy to blend your work life into your home life when it's all happening in the exact same space. So setting, you know, times to stop and times to cook dinner and times to, you know, be back online, I think is even like more important now than ever. I think when you leave an office, at least, you know, you get that break to be in your car or on the subway and you disconnect and you can make that clean break. That's not happening at home. So definitely scheduling my time out more efficiently has been a big one, and making sure I break to walk around the house. I think people forget that you need to stand up. Like in an office, if you are working all day, you might be moving between the kitchen, your desk, meeting spaces. I think you realize how little you don't move. So I think just really scheduling your time like as a whole, like when you're going to stop, when you're going to walk, when you're going to get fresh air is so key. And it's kept me pretty sane. So as someone who just wasn't permanently home, I think lots of people do this all the time, like Jen said, but I had been in an office for like 10 years, so not used to it exactly.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's definitely advice that I need to take and think about. I think that's so important, and make a really great point that it's so easy to stay in front of your desk because you have nowhere else to go. But I can see that, you know, you can get burnt out really quickly by doing that, right? So taking the time to move around, get a change of scenery, and give yourself those hard breaks is so important.
I agree. I'm guilty of that myself. It's a very easy hole to kind of slip down while you're working throughout the day. Another question we had was, how can graduates and students build and show resiliency and other skills during this time? And do you have any suggestions or thoughts on ways that they can improve their marketing skills or experience?
I think as you guys are looking for jobs and figuring out what you're going to do, it is a difficult time because some are still hiring, some aren't. I would say keep an open mind. I know that sometimes, like even when I was graduating, I was like, I want to be in this specific industry and I have to, because I like to shop or something, and just be open-minded to the organization and what they do, because it might end up being something that you like doing. So be open to that. I would say that right now, if you're having a difficult time finding a job, I know there are a lot of companies that are offering like unpaid internships, which isn't ideal, but I've seen a lot of unpaid internships, if you work hard, result in them offering you a job. And especially during this time, if you're able to show resilience by showing up every day, doing really good work and proving yourself to the organization, when their budget does reopen to hire people, you might be their first pick because they already know the kind of work that you can produce. And you know, I had expectations too when I was graduating about salary requirements and all that. And I think that your first job, at least for me, is so important to like figure out what you want to do and what type of company you want to work at. So you might not know if you 100% want to be at a big or large organization or a big or small organization. You'll figure that out as you go. So just try it out. And the last thing I would say is that I didn't personally do this, but I have seen some of my colleagues that I work with now have success in the beginning of their careers doing this. They were open to different positions outside of their role. So very entry-level positions like office admin or an inside salesperson, not always ideal for your first role, but I have a colleague now who she joined our organization right out of school as an inside sales rep. And within 6 months, you know, she had expressed that she wanted to be part of the marketing team, and she now does our social media stuff. And she has such a strong background on the sales side of things that it actually makes her better at her role in marketing. So if you're struggling to find a specific job in marketing or whatever you guys are trying to go into, potentially be open to something like that, as long as it's an organization that you can grow in and shift into that role like that.
So, okay, so as somebody who just went through this entire layoff process, so once I got laid off, my organization made a Slack channel for alumni that worked together at ClassPass. And so there were so many people who were very fresh to their careers at ClassPass that wanted to do something else entirely. And I think a lot of the steps they took could be really, really wonderful for recent grads. There was a lot of external learning. So I understand you just went through college and you're like, okay, I want to start working. But if you can hone a skill that maybe you didn't learn in school, you know, take some Google advertising classes, take boot camps on SQL, how to code, all of these incredible things, build your arsenal and throw that on your resume. So just keep showing that you were continuing to educate yourself and continuing to push into an industry or a part of the organization you're the most interested in. So a lot of people were pivoting to taking a ton of boot camps. A lot of people wanted to go from like customer service to engineering teams, right? So there's tons of incredible coding boot camps out there. They also, a lot of the folks that were further into their careers who were having a hard time finding a role, they decided to start volunteering themselves. So like not as much of an unpaid internship, but volunteering their services to a lot of like the organizations fighting racial injustice right now. A lot of those are grassroots efforts. They need someone to code their website. Like, do you have that ability and skill to go support some of these organizations that don't have the funds? That's wonderful, right? Start help a nonprofit. It can be anything, right? It doesn't need to just be making someone's website. You can help their messaging, their social media. There's always so many ways to help. And continuing to volunteer your hours and time, of course, that's wonderful on your resume, even if that's, you know, helping to deliver food during the pandemic. I think those have been some really interesting paths that I've seen people taking while they are, you know, they don't have a job right now. And then lastly, I just think, no, I'll stop with those two. I think that those are two pretty solid ones. Get yourself more further education, dive deeper on the topics you are really interested in, and build your resume that way for the time being.
I actually want to add one quick thing onto that because you bring up a great point. Like, we have an unpaid intern right now, and I'm encouraging him to learn like our marketing automation tool and, you know, our sales tools, so that when he is going to find a job, he's actually not graduating until next year, but he can already put those things on his resume. And so I'm encouraging him to watch different videos. So exactly like Amanda said, like, research, if you're going into marketing or whatever you're going into, research some of the tools that are used every day by people. And if you guys want to reach out to me, I'm happy to give you a list of those and learn about them and like try to see, like, that'll just be awesome. If you can add that to your resume, you're one step ahead. Because almost every organization uses some variation of the same tools, and they're all like relatively the same to learn. If you've used it at one organization, you can learn the same type of tool, even if it's a different offering at another company. So yeah, that's definitely a good point, Amanda.
Yeah, I was going to say, don't be afraid to have those conversations with Jennifer, with me, with Amanda, with everyone that you know, or, you know, create new connections. I think LinkedIn is something that really developed more as a community to connect with professionals, more so than when I was first entering the workforce. And then you also have, you know, your IC community, the IC Mentor Connect, because when you have those conversations, they, you know, these people can help identify what are those hard skills that you can brush up on and really develop during this time. And then the one thing I also wanted to add was that we are also very much developing that soft skill of resiliency, like, you know, by nature of balancing school or work, or mental health or physical health. This really just prepares you for the workforce in a way that no other structured or formal learning can. So don't be afraid to highlight that too, you know, if you are entering the workforce or looking to switch careers.
Thank you. A lot of great suggestions and advice there. And this is something that I always like to ask, just because, you know, if we all had that magic sort of time machine, and you could go back and talk to your college self, and offer like advice to your college self, or one thing that you think you really need to know while you're in college, what would you say? What is something you would really like to go back and tell yourself? So,
okay, that's a good one. Well, for me specifically, I am a huge planner. So when I was in college, like my senior year graduating, I wanted to like map out my entire career for the long run. You just can't do that. Everyone would tell me, like, so my mentors and others would tell me, like, it just happens. Like, you shift to your next role, it just happens. You don't even know how it happens. It just kind of happens. So I would say just stay focused, like right now in the short term, like find your first job, you know, start working there, learn as much as you can, work as hard as you can, and the rest just kind of leads you down a road. Like if you had asked me 10 years ago if I thought I would be where I am today, I would have no clue. But things kind of just work themselves out. And just continue to network, which a couple of us have said. Just continue to network, because I was fortunate that a lot of the roles that after my first job, I have known someone at every company since that's helped me connect to my other roles. So it's really important to, you know, make a really good impression at work, get along with your colleagues, work together, work hard. And the rest will kind of just work itself out, and you'll get to a good place.
Yeah, that is one thing I forgot to mention is, you know, stay in touch with your classmates, your colleagues. I was introduced to my organization through a classmate who knew someone, so that's so important. And again, yeah, I agree that you never know how it's going to work out, and sometimes learning what you don't like is just as valuable as, you know, doing something that you do like. It helps you really understand the route you want to go. And, you know, I started with what I actually thought would be the dream job for me, you know, working with major clients, seeing the big picture, but then realized what I love best was working with people. So expect to kind of figure it out as things happen.
Oh my gosh. So my advice to my old self in college would have been to actually study abroad. Oh, that's my one silly one. I wish I'd studied abroad. My advice in a true sense would be to, I think it's more so kind of just like letting go of expectations. I think that's been kind of a theme here, but I just had these expectations that I had to be doing something by a certain age, or, right, you know, you had to be in a career, you had to be married, people around you are moving at a certain pace, especially in New York City, and that's very uncomfortable sometimes. And I think my advice is just pause and think about yourself and to try to like block out noise, because that can be debilitating in its own right. I think that can actually set you back. And I think focusing on your path and just continually like what are the goals you need to achieve within the next 6 months, a year to get moving. I think that would be incredible if I had really thought that way at the beginning of my career. I constantly was just very worried about what was happening outside of my control, rather than what was inside of my control. And I think that the networking thing is so good, and I don't mean to harp on it, but I received my job at Shutterstock through like really crazy connections. My trainer at the time was the corporate coach at Shutterstock. She was their team, like she was coaching their workout classes, and she was like, oh, there's all these people from Shutterstock, you should come to this class. I literally worked out with these people for a year, and then someone was like, oh, you do marketing and we're looking for a marketer. And it's like those small weird connections are how things get done and how you can really like make moves. And so I think just like always keeping those options open and talking to everyone is amazing and incredible, but make sure you're doing it, be smart. And when you're on LinkedIn, don't just blast people, find true common ground, do a little bit of research, and connect on a more personal and human level, because we get tons of emails a day and LinkedIn messages. And I'll tell you right now, I'm going to ignore one that says, I just want to connect with you, and then hope you send me an email, right? Let's like make sure things are really human and personal.
Great, thank you. We do try to stress the importance of networking continually. That is one thing I know I harp on as well, is making those connections, and making genuine connections so that you can build on those and find opportunities down the road. Kimberly had asked a question, and it is that what are your thoughts on the recruiting timeline for 2021? Any thoughts on what it might look like and where there might be opportunities based on what you've seen so far?
Recruiting, I mean, my organization is still recruiting. So I'm in telemedicine now. I think telemedicine is hotter than ever. I think there's so many organizations that are still hiring. I have 2 open roles on my team. So timeline right now for us is just ongoing consistently through 2020. This is actually a wonderful time to be recruiting. There are so many incredible individuals who actually were laid off or furloughed. And so the market is amazing right now to find awesome people and awesome graduates coming out. So I think you just need to be focused. I think it's very industry specific what's going to happen in the recruiting space.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think right now, I don't even know I don't know if we're hiring right now, but we're kind of just being conservative, at least till the end of the year. But it's kind of hard to see what's coming and what's going on. But I think that pretty soon, like if anything, it'll start to open back up. And like Amanda said, I've heard of some people who have been getting hired during this time, so people are still hiring. So.
Yeah, it's definitely in flux for us, depending on client needs. So if we don't have openings now, we might have something next week. So like our team does help with new hires and onboarding. So, last week we didn't have anyone coming in, but this week we have maybe 3 people. So it really depends.
Unfortunately, this pandemic meant that some of our students lost job opportunities or internships where offers were rescinded. And so it'll show that they might have a gap in experience on their resumes. What are your thoughts or recommendations for those students? Do you think it's worthwhile for them to put rescinded offers on a resume from an HR standpoint? Or, any thoughts around that?
That's a good question. I think that they could potentially put it on there, but I would be cautious about saying like offer rescinded. I maybe say like due to, COVID or due to the current climate, just so they know why. But I think that people are going to be really open to this and understanding. I mean, at least for me, when I'm hiring, like I wouldn't look at someone's resume, and especially during this time, and say, oh my gosh, they have a gap, like I'm not hiring them. So I think having the gap there isn't going to be a problem, because a lot of people are going to have gaps, even people who are long into their career, who lost their jobs. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. But if it was something that you really wanted to showcase, that I think it is nice to say, like, you know, I did have this offer, I would just at least maybe make a note underneath it, that at least explains, you know, that it was due to what's going on right now. I've never had that come up, so I'm curious to see what Amanda and Jackie think about that too.
I totally agree. I think that you don't have to worry about having that gap during this time, and I would be prepared to maybe talk about it, but I don't think it necessarily has to be on your resume.
I'm hiring right now for 2 more senior roles, and pretty much every resume I've seen says their most recent job is blank to present, like April, it's over. And I know exactly what that is. I know exactly what's going on. And I don't even bring it up. It's not relevant. They're all very qualified candidates, and it has absolutely nothing to do with these people as employees. And I absolutely ignore it. Gaps have never bothered me as a hiring manager. I don't know about everyone else, but I've interviewed folks who've taken like 6 years off. I think I'm really considerate and careful and understanding that people's personal lives are extremely important. You may have taken a year to become a mother, right? You may have done a lot of things, and that doesn't mean you're any less qualified. I think that everyone, just in the general sense, should be very, very cautious of ignoring resumes with gaps, because until you speak with somebody, you don't know why that gap is there. So I think most people will be not at all concerned about the fact that this happened during the pandemic to you. Not at all.
Thanks. Jay Healy had a question, and that is, how does the current conversation about racial justice affect the marketing industry?
Oh, it's massive right now. So I think the biggest thing, especially for my current organization, is that we have so much impact in the healthcare industry and like there is so much conversation around racial injustice in healthcare, and how that impacts it. So we have to be just extremely sensitive about what we're putting out right now, what we're talking about. We also need to understand that if we're making big bets and doing big PR pushes, that it's probably not going to happen. People aren't going to be listening. It's really helped us scale back certain efforts from a brand perspective, so that we're not trying to, number one, like bring down the conversation about racial injustice, because we believe it should be top of mind right now and that people should be speaking about this. But it's actually also helping us, like we're thinking so far into 2021 about this topic and how we want to reframe so many of our initiatives and what we're doing. So yeah, there's a lot going on there. And then I think smart organizations and thoughtful and considerate organizations are being really wise about not overshadowing that topic as a whole right now.
Absolutely, yeah, our organization's doing pretty much the same thing. Just being really careful with the messaging and thinking about that strategy as we go into next year. And then I would say, like, our organization at least is, like the HR team is working really hard on certain initiatives for our organization as well. So it's been nice to hear about all those, and we keep continuing to hear about how they're addressing it as well.
I think, we are also heavily focused in prioritizing inclusion and equity in terms of what we do and how we work with our clients, how we work with our partners. Specifically, we're really taking a look at our partners and, thinking about someone like Facebook, for example. We had, our clients come together. Is this the right place to be? How do we take a stance, as someone who has a voice, and put pressure on partners or media organizations who, are not as, early, at least in the past, have not been as firm on the actions that they could be taking for things like, hate speech, and, other harmful material.
Yeah, thank you. That was a great question, Jay. Are there any other questions? I've kind of gone through my questions. Is there anything else that our attendees would like to ask or hear more about? All right, I guess in closing, if you could all just share with us the traits that you look for most in an awesome marketing individual or someone to bring on a marketing team. What are you looking for?
I'm always looking for somebody who is hardworking, obviously, who wants to collaborate and who's very eager to learn and grow. That's a huge thing. If you're open to learning, like learning the different tools and learning different aspects of the industry that you're working in and about the company, I think you can see a lot of success there. I'm always looking for people who are, you know, just interested in general and trying to figure out what they're passionate about in marketing. The role that I'm currently in with field marketing and events has so many different aspects of marketing. You're working with so many different teams, from the content creative to product marketing to channel marketing to customer marketing. So it's it really opens your eyes to working with so many different roles. So that can be exciting. So just, yeah, I think learning, if you're open to learning, is the biggest one for me.
I second all of that. Those were exactly all the things I was thinking about. Just spending my last, few years at startups, I think I look for people who are extremely flexible and can talk to me about times in their college careers or their personal lives where they've had to pivot and they could adapt and change quickly, especially right now. Every week, every month, something new and big happens, right? Where we all have to sit back and rethink our strategies, and it can be painful, right? Change is not always fun. So looking for people who adapt and then flex and are really easy pivoters to move on to the next thing and understand that the work they were doing, it wasn't in vain. It's just that this is the focus of the business now, and we've got to move. I really like to look for that kind of abilities and people to pivot, move, flex, be really open to all the change.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would just say passion and curiosity. Our CEO really pushes us to be curious because our roles are really to make sense and navigate this constantly evolving landscape that we're in.
Thank you all so much for your wisdom and insight and all this incredible advice, and especially for taking the time to talk to our IC students and some alums that might have joined us as well. So thank you and good luck with everything. And I look forward to chatting again and engaging with you again down the road. So thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys.